y'all? It's Jordan Monin with J Money Disc Golf coming at you with part 4 of my 2023 In the Bag preview. Today I'm talking about my distance drivers. So I carry 7 drivers with me at all times, ranging from slightly understable to extremely overstable. Starting with my slightly understable, I carry a Dynamic Discs Sargent. And the Sargent is a little bit like a Wraith by Innova, but a little bit more overstable. This one is pretty beat in, as are all of the Sargents that I carry. So it will flip up to flat, ride a little bit right, and then finish at the end when released on a slight hyzer. Or I can release it flat and can get a continuously working shot to the right with only a slight, gentle, almost straight line finish at the end of the flight. To me, the Sargent flies a lot like my TI Undertaker from my fairway driver video, but it is more overstable and holds a line for a lot longer. Also has a little bit more fight at the end and throughout the flight with a heavier finish. I love the Sargent because I can trust it on those really straight lines, especially through the woods. If I'm trying to reach out and get a lot of distance in a straight line with not much finish, but having it hold a line because I can trust that it's not so overstable that it's going to be fighting me throughout the flight, and it'll just carry, settle, finish very gently. Next, in my slightly understable, I carry a Glow Champion Shrike by Innova, and I love this disc for the big, high turning shots that need to turn the entire flight, or for heavy hyzer flip-ups that I want to go straight and work right throughout the flight with very little either straight line or left finish. The Shrike is a 13-speed disc, so it can hold a lot of torque and a lot of power, but it is also an understable disc, so it will flip pretty quickly, especially when released either flat or without height. So while it's a somewhat touchy disc, it's an excellent disc to have for those really long bomber shots that you can't afford a hard left finish or you don't want to be working left throughout the flight. For me, the Shrike is also an extremely efficient roller disc because I can throw it on a pretty heavy cut angle and it will stand up throughout the flight, biting a lot of distance off. It has a thick rim that allows it to roll quickly and just very straight and true throughout the flight or the roll, and then settle down without a huge cut either way at the end as it slows down. The next 3 discs in my bag are all pretty similar but have different uses. And those are the Cloudbreaker by Discmania. This is in the new Swedish S-Line plastic. An S-Line DD3 by Discmania, and this is one of the older Innova run S-Line DD3s. And a C-Line DD3 in the new Swedish plastic by Discmania. All 3 of these discs are kind of my true distance drivers. They will have a lot of glide, handle a lot of torque, always have a little bit of finish. They can be thrown forehand or backhand with my maximum power on both sides, and they'll just have a consistent, predictable flight every single time with that long glide finishing left. To me, all 3 of these are kind of the perfect mix of stability and also glide. They, when released properly, either a little bit of hyzer or flat, they'll just get up to flat, ride, and then kind of settle finish. And it usually is a fairly drastic finish, but it's not a dump finish. It's a continuous forward finish as it moves left with a backhand or right with a forehand at the end of the flight. The Cloudbreaker is the least overstable of the 3, and I like it for tailwind shots or just crush distance shots where I need to put some height and get it really pushing forward so I'm not losing distance to an early fade or a stall out. The Cloudbreaker is also the disc that I'm going to if I need to get a big turnover force Annie throughout a flight that will kind of settle and finish straight. The S-Line DD3 has the most glide of these 3 discs. It requires a lot of power to get to that glide because it is also the most overstable of the 3. However, when released properly and given the power to get it up to flat, to get that true glide, it is the furthest reaching of the 3 simply because it has that combination of high glide and high stability that allows it to handle a ton of torque and forward momentum without flipping over, but it has the glide to allow it to travel a long distance before it finishes. And finally, the C-Line DD3 was a disc that at first I really did not like. I did not think that it was going to make my bag when I first threw it, but over time and working with it, I really came to love it. It is a perfect mix of a ton of glide, a ton of straight line distance, but also it's flippy enough that it has a lot of workability. I can work it on a lot of different angles for a lot of different shots to get those shapes that I really need to have for a lot of different distances and a lot of different angles. Next up, moving into my overstable drivers, I carry a GOAT by Mint Discs, and this is in the Apex plastic. I really like the GOAT because it is a truly overstable disc, but it is not so overstable that it can't be manipulated on different angles. It has really good straight line glide, but it never really flips. So it can handle headwinds, it can handle annies that will glide and then come out at the end and finish kind of gently a little bit more straight. Or I can throw it on hyzer and it will continuously be a heavy hyzer fighting disc throughout the flight. The GOAT is a great forehand disc as well because it has a little bit of a shallower profile and fits into my hand really well. So I can get that power through on a forehand shot without ever really having to worry about it catching on the rest of my hand or sliding out too early because of a really thick profile or a big rim. And finally, because the GOAT is not super overstable, I can throw it on kind of hyzer flip ups, I can throw it flat, I can throw it on annie, and it will always have quite a bit of straight line glide before really dumping hard or biting off and finishing, so that it just makes it that you have a very overstable disc that you can rely on, but you also have a disc that will really get that distance before it finishes. And finally, for my distance drivers, I carry a Z-Line Force by Discraft. I love the Force in all of its plastics, but the Z-Line is my favorite because it is so durable while maintaining overstability and having a little bit more glide than the big Z Forces do. This particular Force is a little bit domey and also has a little bit of flexion to it, which gives it a little bit more glide and gives it a little bit more of that straight line power before finishing that I am really looking for in an overstable distance driver. However, even though it has a lot more of that straight line glide, it is still very overstable and just a really good disc to have when you need to get around a corner at the end of a flight, or you want a skipping finish, or you want to force it over and have it finish flat or finish even coming back on a fade angle. Because of its consistent and predictable overstability, the Force is probably the main distance driver that I go to in heavy wind, especially headwinds. It can handle a lot of different angles of wind without ever losing the integrity of its flight, which is what I'm really looking for in an overstable driver. But it also always still has that finish. Even in a headwind, it will still fight out and finish, which again is really what I'm looking for when I say an overstable driver. So those are my distance drivers, and that is it for part 4 of my 2023 In the Bag preview. As always, before you go, please subscribe, like, and share the channel with a friend, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.